There we go. I did it right this time. I hit the right buttons. I'm proud. Joined today by new City Council President, Mike Blessum. Mike, congrats and thanks for joining today.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. We've been very foggy out there. Did you find your way up here okay today?
Yeah, it was foggy on North Hill.
I was struggling up here today.
Yeah, it was.
That weather out there had me all turned for a loop up there. Last night, though, obviously, if you missed last week, we had new Mayor Mark Janser on. This week, we finally had the first city council meeting following the special election on the 5th, which there was one right prior to that, and that was a entertaining meeting. And I think last night can go down in a similar category.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. You know, congrats to Mark Janser, who won the election. He was sworn in last night, and he'll serve out the remainder of that term to next summer, and he'll do a nice job. I mean, he's always been the steady hand that knows his job and knows what to do. So I think to me, it was never a question about whether Mark was capable of doing the job and would do a good job with it. So
yeah,
it was good to get past that part of it.
Yep. Now we get to do it all over again next year.
Yep.
And I think one thing we kind of mentioned off screen that we've mentioned on the show before too, and it kind of leads into part of what you guys have to face next in appointing that new council member. It was thought about, if we could have just appointed that mayor role right away and then gotten to elect the city council member, I suppose on the 5th of August at this stage, that might have been able to expedite some things, make things a little bit simpler. But now you guys get to face the decision of, at least to start out, take applications for the position and try to pick someone from that.
Yeah. Well, and just to clarify a few things too, because we actually got additional legal information, legal advice. And I was part of the canvassing team yesterday that finalizes election results, working with the county auditor, and our attorneys at the city gave us some additional information that they had gleaned from Century Code.
Sure.
Because you get into some really crazy nuance around the form of government that we actually are, and we're what's known as a modern council, which is different from a council city manager style.
Sure.
Which they both sound like they apply to us, right? I mean, we have a city manager, we have a council, but we were formed as a modern council structure. And so under the modern council structure, it's actually very interesting. We had a sort of a misunderstanding of the law when the mayor's was originally vacated.
Sure.
Actually, under the law, we wouldn't have had to have called an election based on
the petition.
Now, I think it's probably the right thing to do.
Sure.
Those things are always, it's sad that they're different sometimes, right? The law says one thing, but the right thing isn't necessarily that. So really the way to think of it is that the petition is advisory to the council.
Sure.
It says the public cares about this, and the council then needs to make a decision on whether we have an election or not. And so legally we're fine, because that is essentially the path that we took. We saw the petition, we brought a motion to set an election day and to hold it. Now, the same exact concept applies here. So it's completely within the council's discretion whether we appoint someone from the community or we hold an election, or both.
Sure.
Because the other thing that is clear under the law is that we can appoint a 7th member, and they serve until the next election, whether that's a special election in December or a full city election next June. So either one of those work. And so last night, just to kind of start down that path, then Paul Pittner brought a motion which was almost word for word exactly the motion I had ready and had given to the clerk and was ready to go with. We had minor differences in how we were approaching it, but the idea is that under Paul's motion, which we did pass, we're asking for letters of intent from members of the community. I mean, really the only requirement is that you live in the city.
Sure.
I mean, literally.
Might be recommended you put a little bit more information than that.
We'd love to hear, what your credentials are.
Technically speaking, that's all that's required.
And so, Paul made a motion that asks for applications or letters of intent through August 28th, which is a Thursday, and that's the date that our council agenda is ready. So it'll coincide with that. We made a minor modification. I amended it to say that we'll have a special meeting on Monday, or I'm sorry,
Tuesday,
on Tuesday, September 2nd, at 4 p.m. And the intent there is for those applicants to come in and to address the council.
Sure.
They'll be given a couple minutes each to sort of make their case, and we can hear from them. And I think Lisa Olson alluded to this a little bit last night. That's been handled differently over time. For me, I want to hear from all of them. I think everybody should have the same exact amount of time to address the council and to sort of make their case. And then, from there, the council's going to have a decision to make. Then there's multiple possible outcomes. If we, again, as other council members were alluding to last night, it politically right now in the city, it may be that we can't come to an agreement on someone that all 6 of us or even 4 of us can agree on.
That's all it technically has to.
Right. And that's perfectly possible and okay, right? I mean, that's how this works. I'd like to think that there are people out there that are level-headed and are willing to work hard and get the job done, and that we could come to a consensus on that. But we need the combination of knowing who that person is and having them put in. Yeah. So that's the question.
And then finding 4 of you that can all, and that's kind of why it got scheduled as soon as it did, the way it sounds. This way, if you guys aren't able to come to an agreement, you would be able to schedule that special election.
Exactly. Yeah, and so then the special election, if we do end up needing to go that route, or as I said, we could do both.
Yeah.
We could appoint someone, and
still call for
there could be a petition that comes in that says, hey, we'd really like to see you guys do an election. And if that happened, there would be time, as you said. So we would be able to schedule that for probably the second week in December, and that puts it right in the timeline that works to still meet state law and all those things.
Having to be 6 months prior to that next election and everything.
And so, one thing to note with all that for those that care about this side of it, the special election we just had for mayor cost us roughly $18,000, and that's just all of the effort and time and ballots and everything that goes into that on the county side. And so we'll get a bill for that, and we'll end up paying that. If we do a council election in December, it'd be similar. It'd be something along those lines. And also keep in mind that is a slightly lower amount because we didn't do early voting. Now the good news is that the auditor's office did a great job of still managing absentee in a way that was pretty similar to early voting. You could still walk in and do it on the spot
and leave it there
and have it done, which is great.
They did a phenomenal job with that.
Marissa's team did a great job,
and there was great turnout for it too.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of people took advantage of that, and so I think we could look at doing the same thing, for December if that's the direction that we decide to go. So there's a lot of unknowns right now where we're going to end up. I think one of the reasons why I would really like to have us get another council member there is that it doesn't do the people of the city good to have continuous 3-3 votes on important matters and to continue to kick the can down the road on things. I mean, we've got serious decisions that have to be made around the budget in particular that and just to kind of level set on that, because we passed the preliminary budget, which is the city manager's version, which for everybody's knowledge includes a $5 million property tax increase. Okay, it's a lot of money. It essentially undoes everything that we did last year and then some. So with that in mind, if we can't come together on ways to adjust that, which is possible in a 6-member
in the
council,
current setting of everything,
that one stays. Nothing changes. So that's, again, it's kind of the nuance of how our body works, that in order to pass a motion. So as an example, there's a discussion that's going to be coming around the amount of street maintenance that we do next year. Right. So this year, I'm trying to remember our numbers. I think we're at 11 million this year for 25.
Then the preliminary budget had it raised up to 12 million for next year.
So we're adding $1 million into there. And that, again, the preliminary budget passed as is. And so right now, if nothing changes, we're going to do 12 million in street repairs next year. And if you think about that, I am of the belief that we're probably at about the max of what we can handle as a city. Just with the disruptions and the time on our engineering staff and everything.
Anyone driving around Minot this summer has had a pretty good feeling of the limits of Minot's construction ability.
And we're facing right now going into the school year, which starts tomorrow, I believe, at Minot High.
Yeah, Wednesday,
where at Magic City, the road in front of it on 16th is closed.
Yeah, which is
it's
one
disruptive.
Exactly.
So with that, though, so one of the discussions that's going to be coming is should we pull that back a little bit? And I think there's consensus that we will to a certain extent. But it's one of those things where if we're not able to come to that consensus and there's a vote on it and it's 3-3, it stays in at 12 million.
Yep.
So the preliminary budget rules the day right now until a motion is made to adjust it from there. And so that's the challenge we have ahead of us if we don't have a seventh member. You know, motions die just for lack of
consensus.
Having consensus.
Yep.
Exactly. So, and again, you know, getting a fourth vote isn't necessarily easier when it's 7. You still have to have the right ideas.
That person could dissent for everything and nothing still gets passed.
And we saw, you know, during the time when the former mayor was still there, we saw some of that. I mean, instead of it being 3-3 votes, it was 4-3 votes.
Yep.
We saw a few of those.
Yeah.
I think maybe less than people might have thought. You know, with the change.
Like especially at like maybe that first month it was pretty prevalent, but throughout the last winter, I think it really went away.
Yeah. And I think part of that was, you know, number one, we got out of some of the more contentious things that would have those differences. Yeah. But we also, you know, city staff made adjustments in the things that were being asked for. And they adjusted to the new reality of the new council. And, you know, so you kind of all work into a groove over time. And, you know, you see that. I mean, I think we've just gone 2 meetings in a row now without having anything pulled on consent. And again, that's staff adjusting to the things they think that we're going to want to talk about. Yeah. You know, last night there was a few items that other times I might have pulled just because I think they're good discussion points. But there were other pieces that I wanted to make sure we spent time on. So we sort of adjusted last night.
Got to prioritize a little bit. And last night was, I think, one of those ones that you saw coming where there was going to be a couple points of conversation that popped up throughout. And obviously we got that with, like we've already been discussing, the appointment, and there was the budget. And before we get into that, there was also the presentation on the staff benefits and how those got a little bit cheaper and the benefits changed a little bit. So I think that'll be beneficial for, assuming you guys do adopt that, I think that'll be beneficial going forward too.
And so last night we did.
Okay.
So
okay.
So it doesn't, you know, budget wise, there's still another step with that you could make some adjustments, but in order to get the benefit plans moving towards being ready for January 1, because they have to adjust.
That's when they
each
start.
year, we've got to move that forward, and so we did. And you know that it was a good adjustment that we're making. One of the things that is giving, I think, some of us heartburn is that we see on the horizon that the benefits program as we've had it is hard to sustain. I mean, I think you know, our consultants have said that, our HR team has said that consistently, city managers' offices have said that. So the question is, how do we transition from where we've been into something more sustainable? Because, you know, and the HR consultants that work with us last night talked about it again. I mean, a $250 deductible on this type of plan is
you don't see that on the market.
Goal. I mean, these are, you know, like beyond the platinum level. These are, you know, I was at 3M, what would it be, in 1995? Sure. And that's the type of plan I had there.
30 years ago.
Good. Yeah, 30 years ago. You know, now, you know, our staff working for us, we have a high deductible plan. We're talking $4,500.
Sure.
You know, and we
250 is a heck of a difference.
It is. And so I think we have to figure out how we continue to make minor adjustments to make sure it's sustainable over time. The good news is with this one, it only raises our costs by a little under 3%, which is good.
It was like 2.8 or something.
Yep. We need that because we have to keep the whole thing under 3% if we can. And so, you know, we have to make those kind of decisions to hopefully continue to adjust in minor increments rather than letting it ride and then a big sledgehammer comes, because that's I think what all of us want to avoid. We want to make sure that we're continuing to do as well for the staff as we can.
And I think that's a great way to put it. And looking forward, I think the staff largely, I don't think it sounded like that maximum, like 25 to 30 people could be affected to some degree by this plan, but largely it sounds like this is probably going to be the best move going forward.
Yeah, and again, it's hard because I think if you took this all just in a vacuum and you didn't have any other considerations, you'd always want to say, well, no, we don't really need to do that. It's a minor amount. We can foot the bill for a little bit of additional, right? But it's not only that. It's a part of, you know, what are we doing with wages and what are we doing with salaries and what are we doing with other expenses and major projects and all these pieces. When we're trying to juggle all of those dollars for the people of the city, we have to take these smaller incremental steps so that we're not left with a really big bad step down the road. So it's my hope that we can continue to do it that way and do it the right way rather than having, you know, more draconian cuts.
That's fair. Yeah, having to actually slash active employees and things like that. Yep. Exactly. And before we get all the way into the budget process, there was one other interesting thing that you guys discussed briefly. It was the airport terminal lease, where that is kind of passed through from the city to the MAC EDC, and then they rent it out to the Air Force. That was an interesting little conversation back and forth about how we're paying them to effectively rent out our own space, kind of is what it sounded like.
Yeah, and so at the beginning of the process, the Air Force, the base leadership was asking through our Task Force 21 team, hey, we'd really love to have sort of a welcome lounge for new airmen in the city, right? Which I think all of us would say is a fabulous idea.
Because twice a year, you're getting a lot of people PCSing in and out of here.
Exactly. And so Brecken and her team at MAC EDC, as they generally do, said, heck yeah, let's go get it done. Yeah. Right. And so her team worked to do it. We ran into some hurdles that appear to be FAA related about what can and can't be done and who can be rented and whether it's got to be market leases and all those things. When you cut all of that away, all of the minutia of why we can't, what we've got to figure out, and this is what I tried to get across to interim city manager Tom Joyce right now, is we need staff and our team finding paths to yes, right? I don't think there's anybody involved that says, wow, we don't really want this. No, we want to get it done. So what does it take to get there? And there's multiple ways to get there. And so last night, what it came down to is we passed it. The requirement in the lease right now says that MAC EDC is going to need to pay something around $7,000 to the airport to lease the space. Well, it's one pocket paying the other. That's the part that kind of bugged some of us, is that it doesn't seem to make any sense.
It's a little cyclical there.
Yeah. The original motion that Rob Fuller made was to just bring that down to $1 and just say, look, yeah, fine. If you want to have a lease agreement in place, that's great. We're going to set it at $1 so we don't have to have the funds exchange. It looks like there's some FAA nuance that we got to look into to make sure. So we approved it as is, but one of the things that I suggested is if we can't solve it on the lease side of what we actually collect, there's a way for us to work the other direction, which is to say our Task Force 21 funding, which still comes from city funds and goes through MAC EDC to support the base's mission. It's the same
could just
mechanism.
Come out of,
We can put those extra dollars through that process and make sure that MAC EDC is able to pay for that way. Because again, MAC EDC is doing a lot of things for the city. It's not always right up front and in our faces. And I'll have as many questions as anyone as I have about the things that we do and how we spend our money. At the same time, their overall lobbying efforts and the work that they do with the base, we need to support that when it makes sense. And this makes sense. I don't think there's anybody that says it doesn't. Yeah. And so my point to Tom Joyce was, we need to figure out how do we do these things and say, yes, let's figure out a way, rather than say, well, no, here's the 4 bullets for why we can't do it that way. I don't want that anymore. We hear that too often, whether it's airport stuff or we hear it from developers, we hear it from things that need to happen where it's like, well, wow, this is a cool project. The developer's not even asking for anything dollars-wise. All they want is to be able to build their facility the way they want it built. Yeah, and can we get past these hurdles that don't need to be there every single time?
Yeah, sometimes the red tape seems to pop up more than maybe it should in some of these instances, where it's something like this that seems like you could have a pretty simple solution to it, where instead of paying one thing directly, you're able to make it a little bit more simple in that regard.
And so the thing that I'm hoping that we can help staff get to is to take a step further than they're doing so far. Because what we're seeing, we get our memos for each item that we're looking at, right? And so on that memo, it essentially said, well, you can do this, this, or this, and none of those really solve the issue that we were looking for. And what I'm hoping for over time, working through the city manager's office, is that we're able to get staff to take that extra step to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we ran into a couple hurdles, but we found an elegant solution. Here's the way that we think that it could be done to meet what we think you're going to be looking for. And here's the steps to get there. And that's what I'm looking for, because, Paul Pittner likes to say this a lot, that, hey, these are our experts, right? When I can't become an expert in FAA law. Yeah. I mean, I can't.
It's just not practical for every.
And we're doing everybody a disservice if I have to. That's not good, right?
That's taking away from how many other things that you should be doing.
That means that we're not getting from our experts what we need. And so I think Jennifer's got, at the airport, has got, I believe, the right information from the FAA. It's how do we take that and say, okay, what's the solution to meet the needs that we're looking for?
Yeah. How can we bridge this
everybody's
gap?
in agreement that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Just let's get it done.
It's just how do we actually bridge that gap to get her done at that point?
Yeah,
no.
Exactly.
And before
it's an interesting one. I mean, those are the types of items that are in front of us where I just want to say, look, just get it done. Like, figure this stuff out. We don't have to solve this.
Should be easier than this kind of thing. But before we get into the budget too, you mentioned him, Tom Joyce. How has his interim transition been going so far?
Good, I think. I think people will see a little bit different demeanor from Tom. A different set of experiences in his past with his military career and things that he did. I've always had a really good working relationship. I did with Harold and I will with Tom.
Yeah.
And I think those are good things. I think Tom. It'll take him a little bit to get his legs under him for things like right in the middle of a meeting. I mean, we saw a couple instances last night where we needed to be able to say, hey, Tom, go and work on this and bring us back what that solution is. The airport thing was one of them. Another one was the police station.
Sure. Yeah.
And we can talk a little bit more about that in a bit here. Again, another motion that Fuller brought to take a look at the police station in a different way. And so I think as Tom starts to get in the groove of what this role is, sitting at the dais with us, he'll move into that role. He's a talented guy, so I think I look forward to him getting rolling with things.
Yeah, I think he's been doing a great job so far, and I think he will do a great job. Just from haven't met Tom directly, but just from the outside looking in, it feels like he's a great candidate to be able to take this role on headstrong. Certainly. And I think before we dive all the way into the budget, I think we're going to take a really quick commercial break. We'll be back in about a minute 15. Make sure I hit the right buttons here. And when we do, we'll come back. We'll talk about the budget and we'll talk about, sales tax in the police department. It's going to be fun.
In the demanding world of oil and gas, precision, safety, and efficiency are non-negotiable. Unmanned operator drone services revolutionizes how you monitor, inspect, and manage your operations. With cutting-edge technology and expert operators, we deliver real-time data, detailed reports, and actionable insights for our valuable clients. Why risk the safety of your team or waste precious time? Our drones access even the most challenging areas with ease, reducing downtime and enhancing safety across your sites. We take the guesswork out of your projects by offering LiDAR, mapping, and inspection services so that your projects stay safe, on budget, and on time. Unmanned operator drone services, where technology meets safety, precision, and efficiency. Contact us today to elevate your operations. Yes, pun intended.
Enjoy Minot's finest authentic Mexican cuisine with a view at Mi Mexico. The rooftop patio is open and ready for you to enjoy a margarita or other cool refreshment along with genuine mouth-watering Mexican entrees. Mi Mexico, South Broadway.
And we're back. I hit the buttons right this time. I didn't fumble it. Jonathan has a great little Stream Deck thing with all the buttons on there labeled. Last week when I had Mark on, I was just trying to click the buttons on the computer. It didn't work out. I did it better this time, Mike. And we have audio too. That's, as always, that is one of my big issues, is there always seems to be an audio bugaboo, but knock on wood, we've been good so far. Now we're going to kind of dive into one of those bigger things from last night, and that was the budget process and the council president response to it, which took on a little different variation than it normally would, with the city council president, then Mark Janser, was acting as interim mayor and running for the position as well. He enlisted at that time city council vice president Lisa Olson to help him with it a little bit. Yep. And they came forward that preliminary budget, pretty much just to make everything simple and easy numbers, it had $29 million levied for property taxes. This new one that they brought forward had about 27. It was about a $2 million reduction, but that's still about $7 or $8 million over what last year was? Yeah,
about three.
Oh, okay,
we're
fair.
Right
fair.
at 24.
Okay,
year.
fair.
So yep. So it was, and again, just to give the full picture of everything going on, like you said, we're at 24 million last year, and that was after the significant, buy down that we did using reserves.
Yep.
And, again, I'll say a little bit of what I said on that last night. The idea that we're using reserves, it gets kind of a bad name among some of the council members right now, because they say, oh, it's unsustainable, we can't do that. Well, we've gone 7 years in a row now where we brought in more revenue than we thought we would, and we spent less money than we thought we would. And so our reserves are healthy for that reason.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, it's okay if we do that, only if we also give back with each budget as well.
Sure.
So the idea is if I bring in an extra $4 million because I did the right things by not spending as much, or I brought in more revenue and sales tax than I thought, as long as we cycle those dollars back in the next budget, we're fine.
Sure.
Because then we're keeping an equilibrium. And so I don't get heartburn over using reserves to balance the budget. I think that's exactly what we should do when we have that.
Especially, when the ability's there, especially. My question on that specifically, at what point in the reserves would you want to stop doing that to keep a level area of reserves stable at that point? Or is there a necessity to have them at a stable level? Or would it be better to keep them as close to a baseline of 0 as we can? That way we know we're hitting that really break-even point on the budget.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there's a few things.
Yeah.
So number one, if you go back to last year's budget process, the first October meeting, which is where all the budget activity happens, like that's where all our motions come through. But one of the things that I asked for at the back end of that process was for new guardrails to be put on our reserves, and particularly on our general fund reserves, for exactly the reason you're talking about. Let's use the council to say, here's what we want. Here's the range that we'd like to see it stay in, and here's where we'll go. Well,
that came back up this spring, I think.
7 months later, a little frustrating for me, but yes, 7 months later, we got a proposal back that Finance Director Dave Lakefield presented, which essentially said, well, we think we're where we should be, and if anything, we should expand that. And so the upper bound that we use is what state law prescribes, which is 75% of our general fund balance. So just, again, using easy numbers, let's say our general fund spending is $40 million.
Yep.
We could have reserves of $30 million. Then,
sure.
75% of it. And under state law, you can't go any higher than that.
Yep.
The legislature along the way has said, look, hoarding money in local
we don't want to do that
either.
either.
You don't want to do that, right? You want a healthy balance, but not overreach. So, my take, and I brought an amendment to try to adjust this, was I thought that should be 50%. So, again, another way to think of it is 6 months worth of operating expense at the city is enough money kept in reserve. And I thought we should be somewhere between 25% of expenditures and 50. And so that's the motion that I brought, and it's one of those that died on a 3-3 vote. Because there are members of the council that want nothing to do with any type of constraint. They want completely wide open rules. And that's not to say that they intend to spend more. Don't get me wrong on that. I'm not saying that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They don't want anything constraining it. They want the ability and the flexibility to do what they believe is right.
Sure.
And I don't blame them for that. That's their perspective on it. My perspective on why we want reserves lower is that when you're flush with money, and this is in our personal lives, right?
Yeah.
Like, you in that time of year, you get a great big tax return, you got an extra couple $1,000s in your bank account. It's a little easier to go make those purchases.
Yep.
I want things constrained so that every time we have something come up like we did last summer where we're going to buy a piece of land by Public Works, we go, $1 million, where are we going to get it? Where's it going to come from? We shouldn't have council members saying, well, yeah, this is why we have reserves. We've got the money. No problem. That shouldn't be that way. And that's why I want that constrained. Okay, so back to your question then. At what point, I believe as long as we keep it no less than 25%. So again, in today's dollars, you're talking somewhere in the range of, say, $15 to $40 million is about what I'm talking about. Again, a lot of money.
It's a big range, yeah.
Okay. I would rather see it towards the lower end, but to me, that's the safe range.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I was looking for. The others didn't agree, and that's okay. I mean, that's why we have this process.
That's how it works, exactly.
But with that in mind, and I said a little of this last night, if we reach a point, so let's say that we have a calamity on the sales tax side. I mean, a COVID level event, right?
No one comes to mind, not for a year.
Exactly. So we've got a lot less sales tax coming through. In that case, yes, that cycling I'm talking about of using the prior year's savings to fund the next year's property tax buy down gets a little bit more difficult, but we all should be recognizing that same thing and going, okay, wait a second, we've got to adjust our budget too.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
This isn't just a vacuum. You don't just say, look, we spend whatever we spend no matter what. If we're having hard times with sales tax or any other tax coming in, we have to adjust the budget side. And part of the problem is that I believe over the long course of time, we've done one but not the other.
Okay.
We've focused on the revenue side, and that's part of the proposals that are out there right now is, hey, we need another $6.5 million in sales tax revenue, and that's where the proposal from Paul that he's had over the last few years. I mean, this isn't something new. It was in his president's letter 3 years ago. The idea that our answer to where we're at budget-wise is that we just need more revenue, I just think it's wrong. I think it's the wrong approach. I think we've got to get our house in order, and then we look at the revenue side once we've figured out what we should be spending.
Sure. No, that's fair. I think that's a great point. And going off of that into the sales tax discussion a little bit too, there was a proposal to switch some of the funding for emergency services, police, fire from the property taxes onto effectively a half penny of sales tax. And one thing that I think we've maybe discussed here prior is, like we mentioned a little bit there, if there was a worst case scenario and sales tax dollars tanked, what kind of, would that have a long-term lasting effect on those? Or in the same theory, would we be able to use those reserves that we do have built up to cover that at that stage?
Yeah. So, there's a few different things there, but the idea is that, yes, reserves are there to help flatten and ride out those storms as they come, right? But the other part of it is that, and again, there's different versions of what we're talking about there.
Yeah.
The version that Fuller brought, which is to say, let's repurpose part of the current first penny and turn that towards what would be public safety. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's property tax relief because it's funding things that are funded out of the general fund.
Yeah.
And the general fund, at the end of the day, when you get to the end of it, when you don't have any money left from all the other sources, then you go ask for property tax to fill the plug, right?
Yep.
So what would happen if we did have that sales tax reduce, the plug on the property tax side would be bigger. My thought would be reduce spending to get to the number.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. Find ways to do it. Hopefully it's a short-term issue that we've got to figure out, and we figure out ways to get there, or maybe a little bit of both. Maybe property tax does have to come up slightly to cover that, but we also have offsetting,
reductions
which would make sense, right? I mean, that's what you do at home. You might go take on a part-time job to bring in some extra funds.
Yeah.
But you probably cut a couple, subscriptions, and you cut a couple other
across
things
the board,
to try to make the budget balance, right? And we just have to think of it the same way. We've got to work through it the same way. But just a willy-nilly, hey, let's bring in an extra $6.5 million with another half cent just is not of interest to me whatsoever.
Yeah, adding additional taxes on top feels hard right now, especially with the sentiment going around town. Obviously, and again, if Measure 4 would have passed, I think we'd be having a different discussion, but that's in the past at this stage, and we're dealing with something that I think is still in a transitionary period with the state legislature. They've worked at it this year, and now going into 2027, I think they're going to continue to build off of it. And we're so much just stuck in a reactionary period with it right now, having to try to deal with what they're going to throw down at us. And right now we are dealing with that 3% cap, which the city of Minot you guys are going through the budget process has just started. So it's,
so Kyler, one of the things to think about, and this is something that I've said throughout, I said it in front of the legislature when I testified there on this bill. I believe it's playing out exactly as I said that it would, which is that every single subdivision across this entire state, their first thought was, what's the maximum the 3% allows me to tax? Yeah. Right? That's their starting point.
That's what we went to right away.
That's exactly
Look for that 700.
29.5, because what we did, just to be clear about this, we didn't, right now, the budget that the city manager put together was over 20% ahead of last year. It put all that back in, that $29.5 million versus 24 million last year is over 20%.
Yeah.
So that's where the minds went at the city staff right away is what's the most possible we could do. What they did is they have the option to use other years as the baseline.
Yeah.
So they used the year prior, the 24 budget.
Yeah, like any of the the current or the two prior years could have been used.
And again, as the mayor said last night, that's how the bill reads. So. Yep, legally we can do it, and I can't, but I'm not going to look the taxpayer in the face and say, yep, I manipulated the numbers to figure out the best way to extract the most amount of money from you that I can.
Sure.
Which, again, that's what the $29.5 million represents. There's no question about that. There was a calculation done to determine what was the most we could pull. So with that in mind, I believe that completely defeats the purpose that the legislature was going for here, which was to bring new fiscal constraint and restraint to local subdivisions. And so it's my commitment that I've said in multiple places that I'm going to continue to work towards no more than a 3% increase over last year's number, which means we would go from 24 million to 24.9 or something like that. And then still work to say, do we have the reserves to pull it back to even? I mean, that's my commitment, and I think we can get there. We have to make good, smart decisions from here till the end of the budget period to get there. To their credit, the mayor and Alderwoman Olson brought a good portion of those back. So they brought back about, they took it from being up 20+% to down to 13%. So the 27 million that they're suggesting takes a bite out of, it does pull back on some street maintenance stuff. I'm trying to remember the other major adjustments. They didn't look at the VERF, the vehicle and equipment fund. They didn't touch that. I think there's some discussion to be had there. There's a few other places where we're going to be looking at numbers to get down to where we need to be. But at the end of the day, they took some good steps. A couple things that I was concerned about that they brought forward was they pushed back in some staff reductions that Harold Stewart had identified that made sense and I thought were the right approach to take. They just brought those back in. And if you think about it long term, the biggest issue we have with the trajectory that our spending is on is related to people. That's because it's so hard to change that trajectory. And so when you're given the opportunity and you have identified things that could change, you've got to take advantage of those when you've got them, because otherwise it just goes up, up, up forever, right? We can adjust projects, we can address street maintenance, we can do those things, but the staff trajectory is what's setting the real budget of the city. When you're employing almost 500 people at the city, those costs are significant.
It adds up fast.
The vast majority of our general fund budget and property tax budget comes from staffing.
Sure.
And so to just automatically give back on the savings the city manager had identified, number one, I think it undermines the process and the work that he went through with his staff. But number two, I think it also just gives up some of the best places for us to be looking right now.
Sure. No, that's fair. And one thing with that too, I know they did some reallocation with a little bit of the sales tax stuff too. But on top of that, so we're sitting, roughly 27 million. Where do you think that extra 2.5 million comes from in cuts? Just off the top of your head.
So number one, just the point that you just made. So one of the adjustments they're suggesting, which is very interesting out the back end of the discussions we just had about it, reallocating the first penny of sales tax. They want to reduce it from 15% for economic development down to 10, and then use that extra 5% to be property tax relief. It's nibbling at the edges, right?
Sure.
And that's fine. There are people in the world that they like to do things that way. They want it to be incremental. We talked about that with benefits, right? Like that's a place where I think we should be incremental. For me, I think we need to take advantage of the possibilities we have to make major adjustments. What they talked about doing would have brought about $500,000 back into the general fund to be used on different places. The other proposal we had would have brought about $3 million back in. And so if we move forward with that, we've got it anyway. But I mentioned just a minute ago the VERF plan, which is setting up a new way of handling purchasing rolling stock vehicles and equipment and things like that. It's immensely expensive. And the issue that I've had with it throughout is that for me, I see it only as a cost adder, because the main thing it does is it puts you on a path to replacing vehicles sooner than you might have otherwise.
Sure.
That can only cost money. And so that's why I'm not just fully sold all in on it. I think it's a better management system for it, and I buy into that. But I think the dollars right now say, we may not be there. And so there may be some adjustments we have to talk through there. At the same time, those have real ramifications, because the VERF is built to cover the equipment purchases we needed to make in 26. So even if we reduce the funding for VERF, we might have to go back and increase the purchases they needed to make if we agree with that.
It still might end up being a requirement regardless, kind of thing.
Yep, exactly. And so, and again, we're just scratching the surface. I've got about a full length, single line sheet of bullets of budget items that I'll be looking at adjusting in our working sessions. But for me, I don't think it's far-fetched at all to say that we can get back under 25 and then use reserves to put us back at parity with last
to
year.
where last year kind of set out.
Me, and the great news about that is then the law does kick in and help us in a better way, because now we've banked that. So if we do need a rainy day down the road, we've got the ability, if we ever had to put that back up. Now, my commitment is I don't think we ever need to get there.
Sure.
But I want to just reassure those that get worried that, oh man, we're not going to fund city services. Well, no. The other thing to always keep in mind for people too is that a bunch of the services that we count on, okay, so water service, trash, things like that, those are all funded through enterprise funds that are fee-based. So you pay for your water, you buy water from the city, you're paying for sewer, you're paying for trash. Those aren't impacted by the mood swings that the economy might have.
Yeah.
Right?
Those are still happening regardless.
Exactly. And again, I have to be committed to making sure that those rates don't get out of hand.
Yeah.
We have to always do that, but it's kind of a microcosm business-like activity where they work for each other. So when we talk about saying, oh, well, wow, we need to cut some spending, we need to do this, those things usually aren't on the table because they're funded directly by the fees that come in for them.
Okay.
And so those are a little bit easier to deal with typically, right? We just have to adjust the trajectory of the fee structure and how that works with inflation. But other than that, we're pretty good. Where it gets really difficult is public safety.
Sure.
Public safety, you're looking at $30+ million in just staffing alone or in those budgets. So, those ones are typically funded directly out of the general fund. And that means essentially property tax, although you have sales tax dollars flowing in right now through general fund reimbursements and things like that. The proposals that are on the table, Fuller's of repurposing the first penny, now Janser and Olson's of repurposing the first penny, but a little
less.
Different,
yeah.
And then Paul's of brand
Just
new
an extra half cent.
Extra dollars coming in. Paul talked about the idea that, well, you could bring this one in and then let NAS sunset. The issue is that NAS doesn't sunset. There's no mechanism for that right now. It stays as is. When the funding is no longer needed, it just reverts the calculation and sticks it all mostly to flood control.
Sure.
A little bit comes back in general fund reimbursement for property tax. So the issue would be, it is truly an add. If that goes on the ballot next summer and people vote to add it in, we will be at an 8% sales tax overall in the city on an ongoing basis, and there's no sunset.
Until effectively a vote would happen to take that away.
Until we change it, exactly. And so I want people to be clear about what we're talking about here. This isn't an exchange of sales tax for property tax, which, by the way, is also problematic. I mean, I think people need to think about the idea that sales tax is one of the most regressive taxes we have. Now, at the same time, I like a consumption tax because you can avoid it if you choose to, right? You can spend less on that if you want to. But at the same time, we're impacting the ones that are that can least afford it. Yeah. The people who, the things they pay with sales tax, whether that's clothing for their kids or
the food you eat. Yeah.
I mean, if you go around the outside of the
there's some way, but if you're going to Walmart, generally speaking,
you're going to pay a bunch of tax, right? So the people that have that sales tax as a higher percentage of their incomes are disproportionately affected by that. And that's not how we should do things, right? Again, it's not to say that we got to stick it to the rich. I mean, that's not my point here, but the sales tax is regressive. And so relying more and more heavily on it, not to mention the fact that it can be very variable.
Yeah, a lot of downturns. It has the potential for a lot of volatility there.
So we need that balance. But the point is, it's not we just need to get the revenue somewhere. Half of the equation always has to be lower the expense, or at least lower their trajectory, right? Because the idea is, if we're expanding the tax base, if the city's growing, we've got more natural property tax coming in that doesn't involve the rate each person pays. It's just new entrants into the market. Yeah. When those happen, that gives us the revenue we need to grow closer to inflation. We just need our growth rate to be closer.
Theoretically, that's a win-win for everyone.
Exactly. That's what all the economic development theory and all that stuff is based on. Oh, we need to increase the tax base. Well, increasing the tax base over the last 15 to 20 years, it's happened, right? We've expanded like crazy. We've had this huge boom that went on. And property taxes are as higher than they've ever been. So that alone doesn't do it. You've got to have fiscal restraint on the spending side to be coupled with it to really take advantage of that. Sure. Now, all that said, you were saddled with flood and NAS. Those are the big factors.
The flood, at least, wholly unforeseen thing that you could, and NAS was something that's been, decades long at this point.
And hopefully it's out there on the horizon.
Couple more years.
By the
fingers
end of the year,
crossed.
we might see water coming in, and hopefully we can sunset that portion of it and reallocate it to the pieces that it'll go to naturally, and that'll help us overall. Because the flood trajectory, the dollars there, it's a tough battle. You're talking about covering bonds. The way I look at it now is my grandson, who just turned 1, will be paying for our flood protection his entire life.
Yeah,
with the bonds. Think of that.
If
he lives to 80 years old, we might be paying these at the end of this century.
We're going out for the majority of the rest of the century at this point, and
that's a big bill to saddle.
Yeah, like
with.
the flood could still be being paid for 100 years post flood at that stage, which, again, for a once in a lifetime flood, I guess at that point, it's a whole new lifetime now. Yeah. But
and it's interesting. Depends on whose lifetime.
Yeah,
right? My parents were around in the 69 flood, and similar in 71 and other one.
There's a few things in the 70s there.
So twice in a lifetime for some, right? We don't know is the issue. It could be next year, but I think we're going to get it done, and we're going to hopefully hold on to it as best as we can and keep the costs low. But we are already we're approaching the point where the sort of fix or the remedy costs more than the flood did, which gets a little scary, right? And so hopefully now we got a long ways to go on it, but we're starting to get through the parts of the city that really have the biggest impact. MI4, when that diversion comes through, that goes kind of along 2nd Avenue and the library and over underneath.
That's going to be huge.
That'll be huge because that's about 60% of the city that's protected. And when that gets finished in a couple of years, that will be one of the big signals that, okay, we're getting this actually done. And a big credit to the taxpayers across the state, because this is funded primarily
from the state.
Not locally. And we have our share, about 35% that we're paying locally. And so we're just like we helped build flood control in Grand Forks and in Fargo, they're helping us now build what we need here. So it's it's sort of the necessary evil of government that we have to have, where individual people can't build flood control.
No,
so you need governments to do it.
You're not going to get individual donors to come in and build flood control for an entire city.
So these are the types of infrastructure projects that are best handled on this kind of scale. It gives us all heartburn with the bill.
Yeah, and that's the flip side of it too. If you want to try to expedite it to get it done in a quicker, more long-term, cost-effective manner, that short-term effect is going to hit even harder at that point. Then, and
that's where interest rates hit us. Whether we can bond, and that's why some of the discussions that are still ongoing at the state level about whether they could set up other revolving funds that could be used. Helping with sort of underwriting the bonding process to make sure that we're moving things along as quickly as we can, because part of the issue that we've got is that it's not exactly cost overruns. That's not the right way to think of it. It's that we're going over the engineer's estimates, which means we can't build as far as we can for the same dollars.
Yeah.
And that's the part that gets a little bit difficult over time. But, the team at the Service River Joint Board is doing good work to try to find opportunities to adjust the original plans and find cost savings along the way. And it's causing some heartburn in certain places for certain property owners, and we're working through those. But overall, I think we're still doing the right things. It's a hard pill to swallow with the dollar amounts that we're talking about.
Hey, almost 15 years out.
Exactly.
It's and again, this is one I love to parrot, and I probably shouldn't because it's not a fair comparison, but our flood took place 14 years after the Grand Forks flood, and their flood control was well finished by the time 2011 rolled around. And obviously there's a whole lot of caveats. The Red River's a lot straighter than the Mouse, and we have the whole Service River basin to consider. Well, they're able to make it just theirs, but it just makes you feel like we should be a little further ahead.
Yeah. And I think, I think as I said, MI4 will really make it feel that way.
Yeah.
Because actually once that goes
feel like you're getting over the hump at that point.
Once that goes into place, then you'll be, based on how it's designed, you'll actually see times when it's used, because it's meant to kick in mainly to make sure it's functioning and keep everything clear and make sure all that's working. But it'll actually be used some years where you wouldn't even think that it was flooding. Yeah. Which is great, because that just kind of tells us that the overall design and everything that's laid out is working well. And, everything really north of that is all then protected, which is phenomenal.
That's huge.
That's what we need.
Yeah,
So.
that'll be a huge one. One other big one that you guys talked about last night was the police department, kind of right at the end there. And in the city council response budget, Mayor Janser and Alderwoman Lisa Olson kind of put forward an idea to start taking savings some reserves every year. I think it was $5 million over the next 3 years to help prepare for that police department thing. And then it was, I think Alderman Fuller came forward and had a motion to kind of try to get that ball rolling a little quicker.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that go on with that. One is that they did want to start earmarking dollars. Again, it's all in the general fund. So it really doesn't make much difference. All it does is on the one graph that we look at from time to time, it changes the color of one section of dollars.
Sure.
Right? Regardless, it's all still sitting in the general fund. And as Dave Lakefield said last night, until it's actually spent, it's still available for anything else general fund related, operations, whatever else, right? So that part, that's fine. I mean, really, one way to think of what they were suggesting is that they were sort of acknowledging that they think it's going to be about $15 million we're going to need to spend. Now, I'm not sure that I agree with that yet, but we'll see where it ends up. But
certainly not the 50 to 70 that some people
we've
were.
Moved well on from that.
that is no more. Yeah.
The other line in the stand we had was our capital improvements budget has $19 million in it. Okay, which is another line in the sand, as I said. Now, the thing to think about, and this is why what Fuller is talking about to me makes so much sense, is that we put $19 million in the CIP. That $19 million was put in there mainly to drive projects coming very soon to do architecture and engineering on that project.
Sure.
Those architecture and engineering projects are based percentage-wise on what the placeholder is in the CIP.
Okay.
So essentially, we're doing all of it backwards. We're saying we've got $19 million available to spend to renovate the police department. We're going to do projects based on the $19 million, and those projects, out of necessity, are going to design to $19 million. And that's what we're going to have. And then those of us that want some constraint and restraint on the council saying, well, no, I'd like to see that be 12, then we're the bad guys, right? Because we're cutting things out of that plan. I think we've got it all backwards. And what Fuller is getting at is number one, his experience in the private sector, building a building, getting things done, where you essentially say, hey, let me have some contractors come in. We're going to look it over. We're going to tell them we're going to need a roof. We're going to need HVAC. We're going to need to move some walls around. And then we need a refresh on a bunch of
these
of the office
current
spaces,
buildings.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All within that. It's really a remodel at a little bigger scale. We've got great contractors in town. I mean, we got guys that can handle this in a heartbeat. If you do it that way, then you say, okay, go ahead and go and get some designs done. Get us what you believe this is going to cost us to do. They go and get all those pieces done. We don't have that great big engineering and architecture expense because they're doing most of it. We still need someone to sign off. So there's going to be some. But here we're talking, instead of $2+ million on architecture and engineering, maybe it's $400,000.
Yeah.
Okay,
you keep it under seven figures at that point.
And now you've got a real competitive bidding process for trying to get that done, where maybe we drive it down to $7 million, right? And now we're getting a good product using a local vendor to build it out. We're getting the police chief what he's looking for. And so last night where we ended up was we tabled Fuller's motion, which was to set a new path, but in my mind only because Chief Fry, working with the city manager's office, is already working down a path based on thoughts that they already have. And we're going to merge these two things, I hope, on the back end here. So that the same concepts Fuller's going for, we meet, but we're incorporating what they're already working on.
Yeah.
And so that's really the difference. I think we're going to be able to get there. There's some nuanced questions around state law and how bidding processes have to work that I think Fuller is working on trying to clear up and make sure he understands, because these exact questions are conversations that have been going on at the state. And the way that they talked about them there was, I had somebody tell me about it. There was a county or maybe even a township that said, look, we need to put up a metal building. And if we put up this metal building, we've got to go through all of these same steps as, for $800,000. Yeah. All these same steps that Minot would if it built a brand new police station on the south end of town, right? Yep. It's just ludicrous. Like, it doesn't make any sense to do it that way when you can buy a packaged metal building and hire an installer to put it up. Like, you don't need the same level of engineering. You need somebody to sign off, but not engineering design.
Exactly.
And so there's nuance
Similar
in all of this, right? And we got to figure out what the law says and what we're allowed to do. But the conceptual point here is that you don't let a placeholder in the CIP drive all of the costs upstream.
Sure.
You don't do that.
Yeah.
Why would we do it
The
that way?
placeholder's already there.
Exactly. And we don't want to do that anymore. We want to take a different approach. Another example of this, we talked about places where we can look at adjustments in the budget. We're being asked to build a new building out at the Public Works area for the storm sewer building. Okay, it's one right now that it's run down. I mean, it needs some
upgrades.
And so there's $2.5 million in the budget to do that. Well, is there any reason why we wouldn't apply that exact same idea here? I mean, it'd be really easy to have representatives of some of the top construction firms in town come over and say, hey, look, guys, we need to replace this building. We need a couple extra things, but overall, we just kind of need the same idea, but built a little better, right?
Just make it last a little longer.
Go back, and they come back and they say, look, I can do it for 1.6, and this guy can do it for 1.8. Well, man, 1.6 is a lot better than 2.5.
Exactly.
Right? That we're driving the process the other direction. So that's the essence of what Fuller was asking about. And I'm bought into that. No problem at all. We got to work through some of the legal issues, and we've got to work on a dual path with what the PD was already doing to come together here in a couple months so we get it off the ground. The good news is hopefully it's not that 15 that they want to set aside. Again, all that what they were saying in that letter that they gave was telling Dave Lakefield, when you show us this graph, show this in this color. That's all that was.
Put these numbers in this line item instead of down here.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
and it's all theoretical because it's all in the general fund anyway.
Yeah,
it's not actually moving to an enterprise fund or something like that or anything else. It's still sitting in the general fund.
Yeah,
so
you're just shifting it around within itself at that stage.
And the point that I made on it last night too is that I feel great about using reserves to build and to do what we need to at the PD. Yeah. We've saved over the last 4 or 5 years an immense amount of money in the PD budget itself because we haven't been able to get them fully staffed.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking $1 million plus a year that
and
we've saved.
And like you were saying, that's where a lot of those reserves that have built up came from. Yeah.
Right. And so I feel really good about doing that. And actually, I think it'd be really easy for us to go back and say, here's about what those dollars look like. As a starting point, that's an easy thing to say. Reserves will cover that part. And then, the point of it is we have a really good finance staff. So
Fantastic.
David and his team do a great job. They will still come and tell us, hey, you know what, you guys, we've got these reserves and we can do it that way. And in general terms, it's great to do that. But there are times when bonding it or borrowing it or using other ways to get the money can be cost effective.
Yeah, is the better long-term option.
And that's what they do. They're very good at that, and we trust them to do those pieces.
Yeah, no, it makes a great point. And before we kind of wrap up, we're running low. I want to address one more thing that was brought up during the personal appearances last night. Josiah Royce obviously ran for mayor, came forward and was questioning some of the integrity of the last election, just to put it loosely. Like, do you think there's any foundation to that, just on the surface of it?
I don't think there's the blinking lights issue this moment. Now, what I will say is I've spent the last nearly 5 years working on election integrity bills at the legislature, things to try to address some of the things that he's talking about to put better safeguards in place. One of the things that was a good outcome of this last legislative session this spring was that there is a new audit law that's been passed, and there will be additional audits going after each election going forward. And I think that that's a place where we'll see it. Now, the thing that he raises around, are the machines counting the ballots? That's one of the core questions that I think a lot of people have. And for me, I think that there's a reluctance on the side of the election leadership, starting at the Secretary of State's office down through the county auditors, because I believe that if they do what the public is asking for, what some in the public are asking for, to get to real hand counting to match up the counts that are coming through the machines, you will find differences. And I think they view that as sort of a scary thought because they think it will sow unrest.
Sure, even if it's one or
minor.
Even if it's a handful one way or the other, it makes a difference.
Exactly. And what they will continually say is that if you do a hand count, so mayor's ballots, we had a little over 5,500. It would not be an insurmountable task to hand count them and figure it out. Pretty straightforward. It's one race, right? If you did that, it may not match exactly. The question then becomes, what's right? Was the machine right? Was the person right? What Josiah is talking about is a different part of the question, which is they believe that there was ballots that were put in that weren't being counted at all.
Yep.
So in his mind, there could be 6,000 total ballots. We only counted 5,500 of them. What happened to the other 500? Now, I think it'd be very unlikely that that would be the case. I'm certainly not scared of doing the count to see if it is, but that's fine.
Because that is the nice thing. We do have all of those paper ballots saved that everyone has to fill the little circle in to vote for.
Exactly. So if we ever had to, we could go back there. So I, again, I don't ever dismiss election integrity concerns, because I think we all owe it to ourselves as free citizens.
My whole lifetime.
Make sure it works. Right?
That's all I've heard about my whole lifetime, from the top presidential level down. There's been issues. I mean, dating back to 2000. I mean, well, before then too, but 2000 was that was the big one where it really started at that point.
And so, I mean, for me, it's not something that I think the council is going to wade into. The county auditor under the new law has both some requirements, but also some
wiggle room
of places where she can take a look at things. And so, I think she does a nice job. So I would expect that, over time, we're going to see more things to reassure the public about the integrity of our elections. Good news is here, it wasn't a particularly close result. We've had some in the past where it was.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a District 3 race that
3
was
years
decided
ago
by less than 10 votes.
Yeah.
On election night, it was 1 vote. And in that particular case, how that machine is counting is very important.
Makes a big difference then.
It does. And so that's the point that I always make at the state legislature when I'm down there testifying on election bills, is that, we can all sweep it under the rug and say, well, it's in the error, it's fine, it's not affecting anything, until it is. And that's the issue. It can be that, and that's the case.
In this instance, if you have a difference of 5 votes one way or the other, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's a minute thing in an election that wasn't that close, like you said. But in a much closer one, like that District 3 thing, or even, I think last year's city council race, the 3rd and 4th place were only like 100 and some votes different. It could make a difference in that case.
Right. And so again, if what Josiah was raising had any legs to it, and let's say it was 500 votes that didn't get counted, you're talking 10% of the votes then.
At that point.
And then at that point, you've got some things that you need to look at. But again, I don't want anybody to think that I'm suggesting that there's that level of issue.
For sure.
What they were saying is that when you would put it in, you wouldn't get the green check mark saying it was counted and the number wouldn't tick up. Well, I've never personally experienced that when I put my ballot in. It's always been fine.
Yep.
At the same time, this is something that's relatively easy, I think, for Marissa to take a look at if she wants to. And so
this would be the time to do it with this situation,
because
kind of thing.
I don't think that there's any real impact that comes from it. Now, with that said, the city is in possession of the ballots because it was our election.
Yep.
So I mean, as we left canvassing yesterday, the ballots are with the city.
We
store them ourselves and we keep them secure there. So it's not in the county auditor's court to do anything different.
It's at the city at this stage.
And from a council perspective, I don't see it as something that we need to hammer on now. I think if there's anything that's going to be done in this area, it's at the legislature. It's
at this
not,
stage.
It's not in individual elections.
Yeah.
So that's it's an interesting discussion. And believe me, I've been as a big a part of it as just about anybody in the state over the last 5 years. And, I have the same general concerns. I don't have that concern.
Yeah, that's fair. Generally, it could be an issue. Specifically to this one, maybe not.
Right.
That's fair. One last one before I think we head off, and this one can be short, and you don't have to give a full one, but what's your projection for how many applications come in for the city council seat?
I think we'll be somewhere between 15 and 20.
Fair.
Would be my guess. And the good news is we'll get to hear hopefully a broad range of people kind of make their case. The one thing that I'll say to anybody listening, if you're interested, please put in, give us your best shot at it. At the same time, the other side of that is be prepared for what it takes.
Yes.
It's, I think to do it right, you're looking at 20 to 30 hours a week.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of effort,
and you should have some base of knowledge coming into this with what's going on right now. And that's why I would love to
see, we see a lot of the same smiling faces at the council meetings. I would expect we'll hear from a couple of those people that want to come. I mean, there's a lot that we're watch at home as well, and maybe paying close attention. The one thing though, like Lisa Olson alluded to last night, the person that comes in, if they're interested in doing this, within a week, they'll be in a meeting where decisions are being made about actual budget line items,
Yes.
whether we're going to fund them or we're not, and we'll be approving that budget within 2 full meetings
Yeah.
of the council.
So it is
it's not
happening
nothing.
fast.
It's happening fast, and you need to go 0 to 60 overnight.
Yep.
And be ready to roll with it. And it's not easy. It's not easy when you get elected in June and you got to go into that
Yeah.
process. You know, Harold Stewart, to his credit, last year when we were running, involved all the candidates throughout the process all the way back into March.
Yeah.
And that was helpful. And I hope this coming spring we do the same thing with the candidates that are out there, because you have to have that baseline of knowledge so that you're not getting clobbered over the head with a $200+ million budget and 190 pages or
And
whatever.
you don't even know how to look at it, let alone what you're looking at
Right.
that
And
stage.
even now, after this is the second cycle I've been this heavily involved in, there's still stuff that you go through and you find like, well, wait, what is that?
Yeah.
Why is that item in here twice? And
Like,
we got to ask that question then and figure it out.
Just from like a tertiary perspective, with us covering it being the second full budget we've covered, we've noticed a lot of it's far easier this time. We know what we're getting into,
Yep.
but the deeper you look into it, some of this stuff, it's still, what is this?
Well, and so much of it still is trusting, especially the city manager.
Yeah.
You know, when the city manager presents a preliminary budget, to me, that's him putting his best foot forward and saying, I believe this matches the priorities of the city and the priorities that I've heard from council.
Sure.
And that's really what that needs to be, because to be honest with you, for us to go through line item by line item, department by department and say, well, no, I don't think you should spend that $2,200 on this piece of equipment.
Yeah.
We can't do it. We need a city manager. We pay him well to do a specific job. He needs to go to bat and say, no, these are the right things, and I've got the right thing in front of you.
And here's why.
I'm asking you to trust me on these pieces that this is what we need. And I think we all want to do that. I think it's just getting to a level of comfort both with the city manager as well as the department heads that we can trust that.
That's fair.
Then we do really have good discussions about, okay, what, should we fund wages at 3%, 3.5% raises? What should that be? Benefits last night?
Yeah.
Where do we want street maintenance? Like, there are then the line items that are more council prerogatives than department prerogatives, right? And we need to be able to trust the department prerogatives. And my hope is that over time, I become more comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And I think this was a big step forward this year because a lot of department heads did a wonderful job.
Yep.
And
And
really did the work.
I think one thing that's beneficial for that too is the whole +3 net and -3 % budget increase or decrease that they all have to come up with as well.
Yeah, and they did, the vast majority of the department heads did a great job with that. And we saw the results in the budget that even put us within range of sticking with last year's numbers.
Yeah.
So, overall, that's a good thing. They did a really nice job, and Harold did a nice job of leading that process.
Yeah. Shout out city staff. Shout out Harold Stewart. Obviously, he's, I guess technically he's with us till September, but in all reality, he's
paid through. That was part of the last meeting. So he's paid through the 23rd of August. So just a couple more days here.
Yep.
But Tom Joyce has assumed
has
full
already started acting.
That was actually acting as of August.
That was like the following day. Yeah, because that meeting was on the 4th. The following day is when that all went into effect. Yep. It's crazy. Yep. Any final words, Mike?
No, I think, I would encourage people, we budget hearings coming up on September 15th.
That's going to be a big one.
There's, last night, we didn't talk about this, but we had a big discussion last night about whether we should have an additional hearing on how sales tax should be spent in the city of Minot. And I would encourage those that care about that and care about whether it's economic development set-asides or anything else related to that, to come to that budget hearing on September 15th, because the council decided last night that they don't want a special one for that.
Yep.
3 of us wanted it, 3 of us didn't.
So if you want your voice to be heard on that or a very similar subject, September 15th is the meeting to come to show up and be able to voice your concerns.
And along with that, the other taxing entities, the school board, the county commission, the park board, all have to have their hearings here in the next month.
Yep.
And so please watch for those. I last few years I've tried to get to all of them. There's been years at the school board where I am one of 1 or 1 of 3 speaking in front of them.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was really the only person saying to them through their entire build process that they were going to need to close elementary schools and that this was going to have a bigger impact. They still have a rough road ahead.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe Central is sustainable for them. And I think they're going to have to make additional big changes to get their budget to work long term. And so people need to get out to these budget hearings because it's the one time a year where you can let them know what your feelings are and how things are working. So, that's what's happening the next month. They're going to all be out there.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's coming up. Rest of August, September, right around the corner. There's a task, or what was it, a Sentinel Town Hall, I think, at the end of August. That's coming up is the 26th at Ann Nicole Nelson Hall, I believe. That's another big one to make sure you look out for. And then, of course, if you want to apply for that city council position, applications have to be into the city clerk's office by August 28th.
Yep.
So there we go.
It's as simple as a letter saying, hey, I'm interested and I'd love to see a few things from you on what your background looks like and stuff like that. But really, at the end of the day, prove that you live in the city and that you're interested. That's really the main requirement. So
that's all we're asking for. Well, Mike, thanks for coming on today. I think we had a great conversation. Likewise. For everyone watching, thanks so much. I appreciate all the comments that came through. I'm half blind and I can't read them at this distance, but I appreciate everyone regardless. Jonathan will be back next Tuesday. Make sure this Thursday you're on the lookout. I'll be here live with Cole Kruger from downtown. We're going to be talking about the grain silos and some other fun stuff here in town going on. And as always, make sure you like, comment,